Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is this: will Jesus come again? For my entire life, I have been hearing people say that Jesus is going to come soon. And I happen to know that for centuries, people have been hearing other people say that Jesus is coming soon. So today's video is actually part of a series that I've been doing based on the book Christianity's Great Dilemma, Is Jesus Coming Again or Is He Not? By Glenn Hill. And in these videos, we're going to examine what Jesus said about when he was coming, because we're almost 2,000 years after his crucifixion. And yet we're still waiting, despite the fact that imminency is highlighted throughout the entire New Testament. Now, in the first video of this series, I went over Matthew 24:34. This generation shall not pass away before all these things take place, or until all of these things take place. And then in my other video, I went over Matthew 16, verses 27 to 28, which says, "Some of you standing here shall not taste death until you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Well, we're going to be going over some more verses in the Gospels today, and we're going to be focusing on the Gospel of John, specifically John 21, verses 21 to 23, because I think it's important, if we're going to establish when Jesus was going to return, then we should look at what he specifically said. Let's go straight to the source. John 21, verses 21 to 23. So Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, "Lord, and what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." Therefore this saying went out among the brethren, that that disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but only, "If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you?" This was the last account of Jesus that John recorded. And it was the third time Jesus had shown himself to his disciples since his resurrection. Now, we are going to read a few verses before the one that we just read to establish some context. But in summary, the disciples had been fishing all night without any luck. They didn't catch anything at all. Suddenly, Jesus appeared on the shore, and they didn't know that it was him right away. And he must have yelled to them to cast their net on the right side of the ship. And they did this, and it completely filled their net with fish. Then the apostles realized that the man on the shore who told them to do this must be Jesus. So Peter, he went overboard and he swam to shore, and the others came with the boat and with a boatload of fish in tow. After they got ashore, they saw that Jesus already had bread and fish on a fire, and he told them to come and dine with him. And so we're going to pick this up at verse 15. So when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Shepherd my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you and bring you where you do not wish to go." Now this he said, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, "Follow me." So in this passage, we see that Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loved him. And Peter told him all 3 times, "Yes, Lord, I love you." Directly after this, Jesus then made a prophecy about how Peter was going to die. And he said that Peter was young then and he went wherever he liked. But when he got older, because of this love that he has for the Lord, others would bind him and carry him where he did not want to go, and they would take his life. Going to read an excerpt from the book Christianity's Great Dilemma right now. It's a good summary of this. Peter was probably feeling like he had been singled out by the Lord for some tough questioning and for a rather disturbing prophecy of his death. We can imagine that Peter was wondering, what about the rest of these guys? Not being one to keep his thoughts to himself, Peter asked Jesus, "Lord, and what shall this man do?" This man was not identified by name, but we have always thought that Peter was referring to John. However, some Bible scholars think this man and the disciple whom Jesus loved was Lazarus. That may be true, but that's a study for another time. For our study, we will assume this man was John. Paraphrasing, the Lord's answer to Peter was something like this: "If I want John to live till I come again, that is none of your business. You just follow me." The Lord seemed to be rather blunt with this leader of his apostles. And now we're finally going to get to the part of the passages that we have read today that tell us when Jesus said that he would come. Now, remember, we learned in the first video in this series that in Matthew 24, Jesus did say that no one knows the day or the hour. However, he did know that it would be in his generation. So he did at this point in time have a general time period, but did not know the specific day, did not know the specific hour. And once again, these verses completely harmonize with that. And Jesus gave another clue about when he would be returning. And you might be wondering, well, what are you talking about? Well, let's go right to the very first passage. Jesus said to him, "If I want him," meaning we're assuming John, "to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." So, if Jesus was planning to come back in our day, in the 21st century, what kind of a statement would that be about John? John would now be about 2,000 years old. He'd still be having birthdays, walking around, just waiting for the Lord to come. That doesn't make any sense at all. I know that there are some fringe people who think that there is John still out there somewhere walking around like the Highlander series. But if we try to use just common sense with this, does that make sense to you? But the thing is that Jesus knew that he would be returning within a few decades. And if you understand that in that context, what he said here makes complete sense. That if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? If it's only a few decades out, then it certainly would be possible for John to still be alive and to not have to be the Highlander. Because as I mentioned before in Matthew 24, Jesus said, "This generation shall not pass away until all these things take place." Beyond that, though, in verse 23, there is even more evidence. "Therefore, this saying went out among the brethren, that disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but only, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you?" So, there was this rumor that was spreading among the brethren that John would not die. Now, most people think that this means that John would not die before the Lord comes. And it says here on page 41, Jesus had not said definitely that John would not die. He only proposed the possibility by saying if he wanted John to live till he came, that had nothing to do with Peter. Now think about this rumor. Word was going around that John would not die. Verse 23 does not include till Jesus comes, but this is implied because that is what Jesus had said. The rumor then was that John would not die before Jesus came back. Now, if the disciples thought it was going to be hundreds and thousands of years before Jesus came again, then this rumor was really crazy. John would live to be hundreds and thousands of years old, waiting for the Lord to come. That makes no sense. Who would believe and spread a rumor like that? This didn't surprise the disciples at all. It didn't throw them off because they already knew that some of them would still be living at his coming. Why? Well, because as we mentioned before, Matthew did tell them in Matthew 16, some of you standing here shall not taste death before you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. This is a thread that is going through the Gospels, which is, those are the first books of the New Testament that we're going to be going through regarding this. But we're also going to focus on the epistles at some point. But just now, for focusing on the Gospels, I hope you can see how much this harmonizes with all of the other passages that are telling us generally when Jesus would be coming. Now, back to this rumor, it says the rumor reinforces the fact that the disciples were looking for Jesus to return in their lifetime. They believed this because that was what their Lord taught them. It also says the rumor was that Jesus had chosen John to be among those oh my word, let me start again. So the rumor was that Jesus had chosen John to be among those some to live till he came. And by some, again, it's referring to Matthew 16, verse 28. And then it says, this passage supports and agrees with Jesus's promises that he would be returning in the generation of the early church age and that he would come back before all of his disciples had died. Now, just in case you missed the other videos that I made before, I'll just show you the verses. Now, I definitely went more deeply into it. I think the video on this one alone was like 40 something minutes, but just so you can see it here. Matthew 24:34. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Now, there are many different things that people say generation actually means, but every other time that Jesus used the phrase this generation in the Gospels, he always meant his contemporary generation. And there is no reason to believe otherwise, especially when you go back to Matthew 23, when Jesus was speaking to the scribes and Pharisees in the temple right before the Olivet Discourse, which is what this is. He said the same thing to them. He said, this generation. And he was clearly talking to them. And so I highly recommend that you go back and read Matthew 23 and then read Matthew 24 so that you can kind of get the flow of how things work. So many times people just take specific verses out without understanding the context. And then it makes it easier for them to say, oh, well, this generation didn't really mean this generation. Well, if you interpret scripture with scripture. That's called the analogy of the faith. So if you interpret scripture with scripture, if you take the context in, you will see that this generation actually meant this generation. Now, some people will say, no, he means the generation that sees the signs. Well, no, that's not what this says. It says this generation. If it wouldn't have been a generation close to them, Jesus would have said that generation, wouldn't he? But he didn't say that. This, which is, I think it's called a near demonstrative pronoun, or at least a demonstrative pronoun, and it means something close to the speaker. That's what this means. Then there are others who will say, well, this generation means race or kind. It doesn't mean that either, because the Greek word that was used was genea. And every time that genea was used, it was used as a generation. The passage where it meant race, it was not the word genea that was used. It was genos. It was a different word. So whenever genea is used, it means generation. And then the one time, it might be more than one, but the one time that I know of where it was translated as race, that was actually the word genos. So it was a different, I don't know if you would call that a conjugation, a different form of that word. So it's important to understand. We don't need to make excuses for Jesus. We don't need to twist things around so that they fit what we think. We need to believe what he said. And if what he said doesn't fit with what we think, then what we think is what's wrong, not what he said. It's important to understand that. So next, let's go to Matthew 16, verses 27 and 28. For the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and will then repay every man according to his deeds. Truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Do you see that? Jesus said that the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and he will repay every man according to his deeds. And then he tells them, some of you are still going to be alive when I come back. That's paraphrasing. Now, I went over this in the video regarding this passage, but very shortly I will say, some people try to say that this is regarding Pentecost. Some people try to say that this is regarding the Transfiguration. And besides the timing issue with Jesus saying to them, well, some of you are still going to be alive when I come back. And then all of a sudden he's talking about something 6 days later, the Transfiguration. I don't think that it would make sense for him to say, some of you are still going to be alive next week. Well, I sure hope so. So besides that, we have in both cases, we find that man was not repaid according to his deeds during this time. There was no rewarding that happened at the Transfiguration or Pentecost. There was no judging. So it's very clear that Jesus was actually talking about his parousia. So if we have all of these passages now, we have this passage about this generation shall not pass away. And then you have this passage saying, some of you are still going to be alive when I come back. And then you have the passage that we went over today saying that John might still be alive. What's it to you? This is what he said to Peter. What's it to you if he remains alive? He's saying there's a possibility that John will be alive when he returns. So if we understand from Matthew 24:34 that a biblical generation, according to the book of Numbers, is 40 years, then it would make sense that in 40 years' time, some of the men would still be alive. John might still be alive in that 40-year period. And do you know what happened in that 40-year period? The temple was destroyed, just as Jesus said was going to happen in Matthew 24. Jerusalem was destroyed, and the old covenant was dissolved. That's it. So, anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. Or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.